Hello, welcome to my channel Nick Room. Like and subscribe. The young lady, you cannot be served in our bank. The words struck like a door slammed in her face. A dark-skinned woman in a sharp suit, her hair neatly styled, stood at the registration counter. Her smile, calm and welcoming, vanished instantly. In front of her was a young employee, his perfectly pressed shirt and forced politeness unable to hide the contempt in his eyes. "Excuse me?" Her voice was soft, but a hint of steel already resonated within it. "You cannot be a client of our bank," he repeated, louder this time so that others could hear. "We have certain requirements. Perhaps you should look for another place." She inhaled slowly. Behind her, some customers turned their heads with interest, others smirked, while some carried on indifferently. She felt dozens of eyes on her, curious, judgmental, condescending. "And what makes you so sure I can't be your client?" she asked calmly. The employee smirked, his eyes drifting across her skin, her clothes, every detail that, to him, screamed outsider. "Don't take it the wrong way. Our bank serves people of a certain level. Your appearance? Well, it clearly doesn't fit. I doubt you have an account here, or that you could even open one." The woman tilted her head slightly. Her fingers brushed the bag where documents proving her status rested. But she didn't rush to show them. Too often she had faced this. Too often people believed they could define her worth by her skin color, by a glance. "And what if I told you, I already have an account here?" she continued. The employee laughed loudly, theatrically. A few customers now openly smiled, exchanging looks. "Young lady," he emphasized the word, as though trying to diminish her significance, "don't make this complicated. This is a serious institution. We cannot waste time on, let's say, unfit clients." Her eyes darkened for a brief moment, but her voice stayed calm. "Interesting. And what exactly makes a client fit?" "Financial status, reputation, connections," he shrugged. "All the things you, forgive me, most likely don't have." She allowed herself a faint smile. Barely noticeable, but there was something in it, a subtle glint that only a keen observer might catch. At that moment, another employee approached the counter, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. She gave the visitor a once-over before turning to her colleague. "What's going on here?" "This lady claims she wants to open an account," he chuckled, "but I already explained that it's impossible." The manager looked at the visitor as though she were a disturbance, something out of place. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said coldly. "We have certain standards here." "Standards?" the dark-skinned woman repeated. "That's an interesting word. And how exactly do these standards decide who is worthy of being your client and who isn't?" The manager frowned. "We don't have to explain. Please leave." A chuckle rippled from somewhere in the room. People watched the scene as though it were a performance. She saw in their eyes curiosity, condescension, even hidden pleasure at another's humiliation. But she also noticed something else. The shame in the eyes of an elderly woman and the confused, unsettled look of a young man witnessing injustice for the first time. The woman straightened her back. "Are you sure you want me to leave?" she asked calmly, though her voice carried a depth that made several people tense. The manager snorted. "Absolutely sure." The woman took a step back. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She only gave them a long, piercing look. "Sometimes the world can turn upside down in a second," she said quietly, "and those who feel like masters today may find themselves at the bottom tomorrow." She turned and walked slowly toward the exit. With each step, her resolve grew. Her son's face graced the billboards of this very bank across the city. He was a symbol of progress and strength. And she, the woman they had just tried to cast out, was the true owner of this entire banking chain. Every branch, every number in the reports. While the employees who dared to humiliate her remained clueless, she knew the moment of revelation was yet to come. The crowd stared after her. Some whispered, some smirked, some stayed silent. But she walked on, dignity radiating from every step. The story was only beginning. And those who looked down on her today would soon learn that it was she who held their fates in her hands. She walked out of the bank slowly, carrying herself with the same regal posture she had when she entered. But inside, she felt a fire not of anger, but of deep exhaustion. How many times had she been through this? How many times had she been seen not as a person, but as a stereotype? A light breeze swept the street. Passers-by, unaware of what had just happened, hurried about their business. But for her, this moment was yet another reminder. The world still wasn't ready to see her as an equal. She recalled the faces of the clients who had watched the scene inside. Some laughed, others looked on with curiosity, but almost no one intervened. For them, it was just entertainment, someone else's humiliation to discuss over lunch. What hurt them most was realizing how ordinary it had become, that such moments weren't the first and wouldn't be the last. She thought of the older woman in the hall who had looked at her with regret. But regret wasn't action. It was passive pity, incapable of saving or changing anything. Images from her childhood surfaced. Her mother holding her hand in a store while the clerk eyed them as if they were about to steal. A teacher at her son's school dismissing his work without even checking it, insisting, "He's not capable of top grades." And now, history repeated itself. The stage had only grown bigger, no longer classrooms and shops, but banks and corporations. She knew discrimination didn't always come as a shout or an insult. More often, it came as quiet stares, whispers, bias, a veiled, "You don't belong." And today, she heard those words again, dressed in different phrases. She sat on a bench by the road, pulled out her phone, and opened the news. On the front page was her son's smiling face, confident, radiant, already the symbol of the bank's advertising campaigns. None of those who humiliated her today had the faintest idea that the man on those billboards was her son. She smiled faintly to herself. The world was full of irony. Nearby was a small cafe. She stepped inside, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window. At the next table, a young woman was chatting with her friend about banking terms. "Can you imagine? They're so reliable," the girl said. "I saw their ad with that young man. His face is so open, so modern. This bank is a symbol of trust." The woman sipped her coffee and nearly laughed. A symbol of trust. Yet only minutes ago, their staff had thrown her out without even listening. She knew she could walk back right now and reveal the truth. Show her documents, state her name, call the board members. With a single word, she could shatter the arrogance of those who had insulted her. But she didn't. Because this wasn't just about personal offense, it was about the system, about the habit of judging by appearance, about how even those working at a bank that branded itself as trustworthy and equal still carried old prejudices within them. Her coffee cooled as she gazed out the window. Each breath reminded her she couldn't let emotions guide her decision. She had to act wisely, at the right moment, and that moment would come. She looked again at her phone, the glowing face of her son beaming from the banner ad. And she knew, soon, those who laughed today would search for her eyes, but under very different circumstances. The story wasn't over. It was only pausing before it truly began. She sat in the cafe for a few more minutes, as if gathering her thoughts. The world outside seemed to carry on as usual. People rushing to work, laughing, talking on their phones. None of them had the slightest idea that just a few steps away, something had happened that could spark a scandal. But for now, she chose silence. Inside the bank, however, things unfolded differently. The employees who had driven her out whispered about the incident in the hallways. The young clerk, the one who first uttered the humiliating words, felt confident, certain he had done the right thing. But among the staff, doubts had already begun to grow. The security guard, who had seen the woman leave, murmured to a colleague, "Did you notice? She was too calm, like she knew something we don't." His colleague shrugged. "So what? Obviously, she wasn't one of our clients." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, the woman left the cafe and headed slowly toward the business district. Towering buildings gleamed in the sunlight, and among them stood out the grand central office of the bank. Her son was due to arrive there soon, the face of the bank's advertising campaign, idolized by thousands of clients, a symbol of openness and modern values. She knew the schedule, knew he would be there for an official photo session, and she understood. Many of those who had refused to see her as an equal earlier today would soon gather in one room, their smiles fixed in place for the cameras. At that very moment in the bank, the manager, the same woman who had ordered her to leave, entered the department head's office. "We had a small incident," she began. "A woman came in, tried to open an account. I explained that our bank works with clients of a certain level." The department head raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you handled that correctly? Times have changed. We need a positive image. One complaint in social media will tear us apart." But she clearly didn't fit. The manager tried to argue. "You can't judge by appearances," he cut her off. "You remember the scandal our competitors had when that discrimination story broke." The manager pressed her lips together. She remembered the woman's gaze, calm, piercing, as if reading her thoughts. The woman, meanwhile, pulled out her phone again. On the screen appeared her son's face once more, this time on the homepage of a major news outlet. The article spoke of how the bank promoted equality and openness, how it prided itself on choosing young leaders who inspired society for its campaigns. She allowed herself a faint, ironic smile. How amusing! The very same employees who had driven her out probably boasted about those ads. They probably told clients, "Look, we support diversity." Yet, in truth, nothing had changed. She decided to step into another branch located near the main office. The interior here was grander and the staff more polished. Again, she was met with cautionless, openly hostile, but still restrained. One employee approached her politely, though his voice was cool. "How may I help you?" "I'd like to learn more about your premium services," she replied calmly. The employee hesitated. He didn't dismiss her outright, as the others had. But his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Was she worth the effort? At that moment, screens lit up in the hall, broadcasting the bank's latest commercial. Her son, dressed in a sharp suit, declared, "This bank is for everyone who believes in the future." His voice was confident, his face open and welcoming. Clients paused to watch. The irony struck her heart again. Every time she faced doubt, she never raised her voice, never argued. But inside, a force was building not revenge, but resolve. She knew that sooner or later, the moment would come when she would reveal the truth. For now, she allowed the system to expose itself, as if collecting evidence. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the bank. Someone remarked that the mysterious woman they had expelled might be someone important. Another recalled her expensive watch, the kind no ordinary passerby would wear. And unease began to creep in. What if they had made a mistake? She stepped outside once more. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, its glow reflected in the glass facades of the financial district. The city carried on, unaware that a story was unfolding in its heart, a story that would soon upend familiar roles. Her steps were steady. She knew that every humiliation came with a price, and those who believed themselves untouchable today would soon scramble for excuses tomorrow. She still kept silent, still guarded the truth that she was the true owner of the bank. But her silence was not weakness. It was her weapon. The board of directors gathered in the central office, a spacious hall with a long table, around which sat men and women in expensive suits. The atmosphere seemed businesslike, yet a faint unease lingered in the air. One of the directors set aside his folder and frowned. "Colleagues, I'd like to raise a matter that may seem trivial at first glance. This morning, an incident occurred in one of our branches." "What incident?" asked a silver-haired man sharply, known for his impatience with minor issues. "A woman was asked to leave the bank, rather rudely." "And what's unusual about that?" Someone smirked. "Dozens of random people come in every day whom we can't serve." That's just it, the first director continued. This woman behaved far too calmly, too confidently. The guard reported that she said something that unsettled him. Sometimes the world turns upside down in a second. Several people exchanged looks. The phrase sounded strange, almost like a warning. And what do you propose? The chairman asked irritably. Are we going to discuss every visitor a manager happens not to like? I'm not suggesting we blow this up, the director replied steadily. But there's a risk this case could surface. The world is far too sensitive now to issues of discrimination. One complaint, and the media will make a scandal of it. Silence fell across the hall. Everyone remembered all too well how, just months earlier, a rival bank had found itself at the centre of a firestorm after a similar case. They had been forced to pay massive fines, replace branch management, and their reputation never fully recovered. Meanwhile, the woman sat in her apartment, gazing out at the night city from her chair by the window. The lights of the skyscrapers reminded her that power and money were concentrated within those towers. But she knew. Real power belonged to those who could wait and act at the right moment. She replayed the day's events in her mind, like a chess player anticipating an opponent's moves. They had humiliated her, thrown her out, but she didn't feel defeated. On the contrary, she now had even more reason to let them reveal their true nature. The next day, in the bank's office, staff were already whispering about the mysterious woman. The story grew with every telling. Some said she was a journalist testing the quality of service. Others insisted she was a representative of a major investor. Someone even spread the rumor that it had been a board inspection. The manager who had first ordered her removal was beginning to grow nervous. She realized that if the woman turned out to hold any influence at all, her career would be over. That same day, new directives appeared in the office. Every client must be greeted with the utmost politeness, regardless of appearance. Staff were reminded of the bank's values. But inside, everyone knew it was nothing but a panicked reaction, born of fear. The woman, meanwhile, visited another branch. This time, she was received with exaggerated courtesy. The staff smiled too widely, their voices strained with effort. She saw through the pretense, felt their tension. Yet she said nothing. "How may we assist you?" a young specialist asked, nearly stammering with eagerness. "I'd like to learn more about your premium services," she answered with the same calmness. Immediately, she was offered coffee, shown to a private office, given detailed presentations. But she knew this wasn't genuine hospitality, it was fear. The rumors continued to grow. In the corridors of the board, some whispered that the mysterious visitor might actually be the very investor who held most of the bank's capital. Others scoffed, but their words carried a rising note of worry. "If that's true," one director said grimly, "then we've made the biggest mistake of the decade." She walked through the city streets, each step carrying an invisible weight of power. Her son was preparing for another press conference, his face soon to appear once again on posters and screens. She knew the moment of truth was inevitable, but for now, she remained silent, watching as those who thought themselves masters of fate tangled themselves deeper in fear and suspicion. Her story was only beginning to unfold. With each passing day, the tension grew, and those who once laughed at her now felt the chill of an approaching catastrophe. The board of directors gathered once more, but this time the atmosphere was far more strained. Around the long table, there were no usual jokes, no confident speeches. Every person present felt the weight of a shadow looming over the bank. "We must find out who this woman is," the chairman said, sweeping his gaze across the room. "Rumors are spreading, yet we have no information. If she really is some inspector or a person of influence, we cannot afford to sit idle." "But how do we do that?" asked one director. "No name, no contacts, only the employees' descriptions." "Then start with that," the chairman snapped. "Review surveillance cameras, question the guards, any detail might be key." The branch manager, the very one who had thrown the woman out, sat with her eyes lowered. She didn't dare look up. because she already felt her guilt had become obvious. Every hour she replayed the moment she had said, "I must ask you to leave." At the time, it seemed proper and natural, but now those words echoed like a sentence on her career. Tension also filled the halls of the bank. Employees forced smiles at every client, even those they might once have ignored. The atmosphere became almost artificial. Overly polite greetings, excessive attention to detail. Customers sensed the strain, but didn't understand why. The woman, meanwhile, continued to observe. She visited different branches, sat in waiting areas, asked tellers questions. Now she was greeted as a special guest, though no one officially knew who she was. She noticed how expressions shifted on their faces, how they tried to make amends without even knowing the truth. One evening, two directors spoke in hushed tones behind closed doors. "Do you realize this is starting to feel like a nightmare?" one said. "We're losing control." "We can't afford a blow to our reputation," the other replied. "If she's a journalist or an investor's representative, we're headed for disaster." "And what if she's someone else entirely?" the first murmured. "I can't shake the feeling we're missing something." At headquarters, databases were combed through meticulously. Security staff rewatched surveillance footage, printed stills, tried to match her appearance with records. But the more they searched, the less they found. She looked too ordinary, and that made it all the more unsettling. She could be anyone. On the city streets, her face was still unknown, but only for the moment. Her son was preparing for a new advertising campaign, and soon billboards would show him together with his family. The photo shoot was already scheduled. The secret of her identity was only days away from surfacing. At home, she thought, they're digging their own grave. Her silence was the calm before the storm. She had no intention of punishing nervous clerks or petty managers. She was waiting for the moment when the entire leadership, the full board, would stand face to face with the truth. Meanwhile, mid-level employees began to panic. They feared the blame would fall on them. Some tried to recall every word spoken to the woman, others prepared excuses in advance. We didn't know. But fear united them all. No one wanted to be the scapegoat. Several customers who had witnessed the scene in the branch began sharing it on social media. For now, the posts were small, barely noticed. But rumors had a way of growing. One post, another, and soon the story of the mysterious woman who was thrown out of a bank was being debated in forums. Who was she? A journalist? An inspector? She walked again through one branch, and this time the manager himself approached her. He spoke with exaggerated respect, offered the best services, listed privileges for special clients. She listened, nodding slightly, but inside she smiled. They already believed they had to earn her favor. The board of directors, meanwhile, tightened internal control. Emergency meetings were called, urgent reports demanded from staff, surprise audits launched in every branch. But the harder they tried to fix the situation, the clearer it became. They were acting out of fear, not principle. That evening, as she walked the illuminated streets, a group of teenagers passed by. One of them held a bank brochure with her son's smiling face on it. "Look," he said to his friend, "this bank is for everyone now. Even people like us can open an account." She slowed her pace, and her eyes glimmered. In those words was the hope that gave meaning to everything she was doing. But for now, she endured the humiliations, watching as the world revealed its true nature. She knew the day of revelation was near. For now, the board searched in panic, and employees puzzled over who she could be. And she remained in the shadows. Her silence grew heavier with each passing day for those who saw her only as a stranger. The board of directors gathered in a special chamber on the top floor of the headquarters. It was an emergency session, known in advance only to a select few. The atmosphere felt conspiratorial, curtains drawn tight, phones surrendered to security, faces tense. "We've stalled for too long," the chairman began, slamming his palm on the table. "Every day the rumors grow louder. Today, another post appeared on social media about The woman who was thrown out of a branch. People are talking about it. Tomorrow, it could be in the news. We need to identify her, said another director. She could be an investor, or a competitor, or a journalist undercover. What if this is government-related? A third interjected. Have you forgotten that recent inspections targeted discrimination? A wave of whispers broke out. Panic seeped through their measured words. We'll appoint a task force, the chairman said firmly. They'll handle the search. Cameras, client lists, connections. I want to know who she is immediately. What they didn't know was that, at that very moment, the woman was in the same building. She sat in the lobby, appearing like any ordinary client, studying the paintings on the walls. No one recognized her, but the staff treated her with deliberate courtesy. She was invited to wait in the VIP area, offered water, coffee. Everything around her had changed. The irony was unmistakable. The very walls where, only yesterday, she had heard, "You cannot be our client," now greeted her with rehearsed smiles. But she knew this wasn't respect, it was fear. The whispers in the hallways grew louder. "She's here again. Do you see her?" one employee murmured. "Are you sure it's the same woman?" "Positive. I was there when they kicked her out this morning. Now everyone walks around her like she's a queen." She heard the words. She didn't turn, didn't react. She didn't need to. Every sentence spoken behind her back brought the moment of truth closer. Meanwhile, inside the boardroom, the tension mounted. "We can't afford a scandal," one director insisted. "If this is tied to discrimination, we'll be forced to pay massive fines. And worst of all, our reputation will be destroyed." "What if this was deliberate?" another suggested. "What if someone is trying to set us up?" The words hung in the air. No one knew how to respond. The woman rose from her chair and walked slowly down the corridor. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor. She stopped by a window, gazing at the evening city. Her reflection was calm, almost expressionless, but her eyes glowed with inner strength. From behind the doors of the boardroom came bursts of voices, sometimes sharp, sometimes muffled. She understood. Her story was being debated inside. The very people who believed themselves to be arbiters of fate were now speculating about who she was, and each one of them feared making the wrong move. She knew the moment would come when their masks would fall. For now, she simply watched them tangle themselves deeper in fear. Her silence pressed down on them more heavily than any words could. Night fell over the city. The lights in the boardroom stayed on. The directors argued, blamed one another, searched for scapegoats, but none of them realized the answers were only a few steps away, just beyond the walls of their own office. And the woman left slowly, with the same composure she had shown the first time they had forced her out. The difference was that now it was no longer she who looked vulnerable. The system itself, so solid in appearance, was trembling from within. The morning began with troubling news. Several city newspapers ran a headline: "Unknown woman reports discrimination in prominent bank." The article was short, based only on eyewitness posts from social media, but the wording alone struck a blow to the company's image. In the corridors of the board, confusion reigned. "I told you this would spill out," one of them exclaimed, slamming the paper on the table. While we argued, the story started living its own life. "It's still unofficial," another noted. "No names, no proof. We can deny it." "Deny it?" snapped a third. "What if photos appear tomorrow?" Silence fell. That was their greatest fear, that the woman's anonymity would vanish and her face would make the front pages. Meanwhile, she walked through the city streets, watching her son's face beam at her from every billboard. His campaign photos were everywhere, on buses, in shop windows, on giant screens. That smiling face, the symbol of progress and equality. People posed for pictures in front of the posters, laughing, snapping selfies. Pride for her son mingled with the bitterness of knowing that the very bank he represented, the one that made him a symbol, had humiliated her the day before, simply because of her skin color. Journalists began pressing the bank's official accounts with questions. Is it true that discrimination occurred at one of your branches? Boss, why is the leadership silent? How will the bank respond to these accusations? The PR department scrambled, releasing dry statements. We are reviewing the information, and the bank adheres to principles of equality. But inside, they knew. If the truth came out, a couple of press releases wouldn't save them. The woman, meanwhile, appeared again at another branch. This time, the staff's reaction was even more telling. The moment she crossed the threshold, 2 administrators hurried toward her. "Welcome," a young woman in a suit said, her smile stretched too tightly. "How may we assist you today?" "I only need a consultation," she replied calmly. They led her to a private office, offered her tea, even tried to strike up friendly conversation. She sat, listening, barely reacting, allowing them to try. That evening, one of the directors was on his way home when he noticed a massive bank billboard. On it was her son, confident, smiling in his suit. And next to him, a photo of his family. Her. The director froze, his heart tightening painfully. He recognized her. The very woman they had expelled, the one they had debated for days, whose identity they had desperately tried to uncover. She looked down at him from the poster, straight into his eyes. At first, he couldn't believe it. He stepped closer, studied the image. There was no mistake. It was her. "My God," he whispered. The next day, he entered the boardroom pale and shaken. "I saw her," he said quietly. "On a billboard. It's her." "Where?" Several voices demanded at once. "On our own advertisement. She's the mother of our campaign's leading face." The silence that followed was deafening. No one knew what to say. Everyone understood. The situation was now completely out of their control. The woman sat at home, looking at the photos of her son plastered across the city. She knew at least one director had recognized her by now, but still she remained silent. Let them writhe in their own fears. Let them grasp the depth of their mistake on their own. Their panic was her silent reply. The meeting began in grim silence. The director who had seen her face on the billboard the night before was the first to rise. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "Colleagues, I won't mince words. I saw her. This is no rumor, no speculation. The woman our employees expelled from a branch, she is the mother of our campaign's face." A wave of discontent rippled through the room. "Are you certain?" one senior director asked, frowning as if he had heard nonsense. "Absolutely. I was standing right beneath the billboard. Her photograph was printed next to her son's. And I swear, there is no mistake." "Then why hasn't she said anything?" another interjected. "If that's true, why hasn't she identified herself? Why hide?" "That's what's troubling," the first director replied quietly. "She's waiting. She's watching." The words hung heavy in the air, filling the others with unease. "We must verify this," the chairman declared. "Have our people review the advertising materials. If it's true, the situation is far more serious than we imagined." Just then, an assistant entered and placed fresh newspapers on the table. On the front page, an interview with the son, the face of the bank. The article praised his success, his family, the values he championed. In the photograph, he had his arm around his mother. The room fell into deathly silence. "This is the end," someone muttered. "If she chooses, we're all finished." Panic mounted. Some directors whispered about bribing her, others about begging for forgiveness, still others about silencing the story. But none dared say it aloud. Meanwhile, the woman herself entered another branch. She carried herself calmly, as though nothing had happened, though she could feel the change in the air. Employees greeted her with excessive politeness, their eyes betraying something new fear. The rumors had clearly reached them. "Welcome," said the branch manager, nearly bowing. "We are very honored to have you here." "Thank you," she answered softly. "I'd simply like to observe how your bank operates." The manager stiffened as if each of her words were a test. At the same time, journalists pressed harder. During a press conference for the new campaign, one reporter raised his hand and asked, "Excuse me, but does the bank have any comment on the reports of discrimination in one of your branches? And is it true that the mother of your campaign spokesperson was herself the victim of this incident?" The hall erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed in rapid succession. The bank's representative at the table turned pale. He had clearly not expected such a direct strike. We are still reviewing this information," he stammered, avoiding their eyes. That was enough. Headlines spread instantly across news feeds. Bank does not deny discrimination allegations. Scandal surrounding campaign faces mother. The board reconvened that same evening, now consumed by panic. "We must meet with her immediately," one insisted. "If we stay silent, this will destroy us." "And what if she refuses?" another countered. "It's our fault. What would stop her from telling everything?" They argued over one another, but they all understood one thing. The initiative was no longer theirs. Everything now depended on the woman they had deemed unworthy of their bank. At home, she sat watching the television report. The anchor spoke of a shocking incident, while images of her son surrounded by reporters flashed across the screen. She did not smile, nor revel in their fear. What she felt was bitterness, not for herself, but for the fact that such humiliations still had a place in the world. But she knew her silence was drawing to an end. And when she spoke, everything would change. The journalists could sense blood. By the very next day, strangers with cameras and recorders had begun to gather near her home. They didn't approach or ask questions, but they watched, documenting her every move. That evening, a news report aired. The woman at the center of the country's largest banking scandal was seen again today at a branch. Her face was blurred, but it was enough to stir public outrage. Inside the bank, panic reigned. Internal chats buzzed with whispers and speculation. Is it really her? Why does she keep coming back every day? What if she sues? Such messages multiplied by the hour. No one dared to dismiss her anymore as a random visitor. Now, her presence had become the symbol of an approaching catastrophe. The board of directors met behind closed doors. The doors to the hall were tightly shut, security posted in the corridors. Their faces showed fatigue and fear. "We are losing control," the chairman said, striking the table with his fist. "The journalists already know everything. By tomorrow, this story will be the #1 headline in the country." "We need to meet with her," one director said quietly. "In person. No press, no witnesses. That's the only way we can still change something." "And if she refuses?" another asked doubtfully. "We made her our enemy." "All the more reason to act now," a third insisted, "before she speaks officially." After long debate, they made their decision. Arrange a secret meeting. Officially, it would be a consultation for a valued client, but in truth, it would be an attempt to beg her for silence. Meanwhile, the woman walked calmly through the evening city. She felt the eyes of photographers, heard the clicking of cameras, but did not hurry. Her composure only frustrated those hunting for a sensational quote. She offered no comments, raised no voice, and the mystery only deepened. In a cafe, two reporters whispered behind her back, "Did you hear? The board is planning to invite her. Do you think she'll agree? They'll pay anything to bury this story." She pretended not to hear, only smiling faintly into her coffee cup. The next day, an official letter appeared in her mailbox. Polite, full of deference, it invited her to the headquarters for a personal meeting to discuss opportunities for cooperation. The signatures at the bottom belonged to the chairman and several board members. She studied the paper for a long time. It was almost symbolic an invitation into the very place where, only weeks ago, she had been cast out. Now, the doors swung open with bows and smiles. That evening, preparations filled the bank's halls. Flowers were arranged in the meeting room, polished tableware gleamed, coffee and tea were prepared. Staff whispered, "She's coming." She already agreed. But no one knew what her answer would truly be. The board assembled early. Each looked tense, as though awaiting a verdict. "We must be extremely careful," the chairman warned. "One wrong word could ruin everything. No excuses, no arguments, only respect and offers." But deep down, they knew. The power no longer belonged to them. The woman left her home in a sharp black suit. Her stride was slow but unwavering. Journalists rushed after her, cameras flashing non-stop. But she said nothing. She simply entered a car and headed toward the very building where she had once heard the words, "You cannot be served in our bank." She knew the moment of truth was near. As her car pulled up to the central office, a crowd of journalists was already gathered at the entrance. Cameras flashed blindingly, reporters shouted questions, but the woman walked as though no one else existed. Her steps were slow, steady, each click of her heels on marble echoing like the prelude to a story yet to be told. The guards, usually cold and indifferent, now flung the doors open for her with exaggerated respect. One even bowed slightly, as though greeting royalty. She noted it in silence. Not long ago, these same doors might have slammed in her face. Inside the meeting hall, silence reigned. The long table gleamed with polish, set with tea, coffee, and light refreshments. The board of directors sat in full attendance. Faces once accustomed to smug confidence now betrayed unease. No one knew how to begin. She entered and stopped at the table. Not a muscle moved on her face. Only her eyes, calm, piercing, made several directors look away. "Good afternoon," she spoke first. Her voice was even, soft, but in that softness lay steel. "Good afternoon," the chairman replied quickly, rising and extending his hand. We are very grateful you agreed to meet with us." She shook his hand lightly, almost formally, and sat down. The directors followed suit, like students before a strict examiner. "We would like to discuss the situation," one began, stumbling over words. "We were informed that, perhaps, there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Her voice rang slightly louder. "Interesting. Usually that word is used when someone accidentally steps on your foot. This was humiliation." The words landed like a blow. Several directors exchanged uneasy glances. One tugged nervously at his tie. "We deeply regret this," the chairman broke in. "You must understand, the staff made a mistake that does not reflect our company's values." She studied him closely, unblinking. "Values, you say? Amusing. Every day I see your billboards with my son's smiling face. They read, 'This bank is for everyone.' Yet, when I entered your branch yesterday, I was told, 'You cannot be our client.' Where were your values then?" The silence grew heavier. No one dared to argue. "We are prepared to offer you special terms," another director rushed out. "Programs unavailable even to premium clients. Anything you wish." She smiled faintly, but the smile was cold. "Anything I wish?" she echoed. "Interesting. Yet yesterday, all I wished for was to be treated as a client." The words struck harder than any accusation. Once again, silence fell. "We ask for your forgiveness," the chairman said, his voice trembling. "We will do everything to correct this mistake." She rose slowly from her chair, her presence towering over them. "You fear this story will destroy your bank," she said calmly. "But you do not fear the real danger. That inside your system, discrimination has become normal. Even if tomorrow the papers forget me, what will remain is your habit of judging by skin color, by clothing, by glance." One director could not hold back and whispered, "What do you want from us?" She looked at him with the same calm strength. "For now, I want nothing. I only want you to hear your own fear." And she turned toward the door. They all watched her go. None dared to stop her. The door closed softly behind her. But to the board, it sounded like a verdict. They sat in silence, each one realizing she had demanded nothing, named no price. but that silence was more terrifying than any threat. She walked down the corridor with a light smile. Her secret remained intact. They did not know that the woman before them was not only the mother of their campaign's face, but the true owner of the entire empire. And it was that knowledge, hidden within her, that gave her power, the power to let them drown in their own fear and speculation. The journalists moved quickly. By the very next day, after her visit to the central office, news sites blared with headlines. Bank on the brink of scandal. Mother of campaign face suffers discrimination. Board of directors silent. The bank's press office phones rang non-stop. Reporters demanded comments. Clients asked questions. Investors grew uneasy. Every hour of silence only heightened the tension. Inside the company, chaos spread. In the hallways, employees whispered, but no longer hid their fear. "Did you see the news?" one young woman asked her colleague. "They're saying it was the mother of the guy from the ads." "I saw," he replied grimly. "If that's true, we're doomed." The board reconvened once more. No one tried to maintain the appearance of calm anymore. Their faces showed exhaustion and despair. "Her silence is killing us," one director said. "If she had spoken publicly, at least we could respond, defend ourselves, argue. But she says nothing, and that makes her a greater threat. People think, if she's silent, she must be preparing something big." "We need to offer her a deal," another urged. "Money, shares, anything, as long as she stops being a mystery." The chairman shook his head darkly. "You don't understand. This is no longer about money. She wants us to feel the same humiliation she once endured." And you know what? She's succeeded. The words cut through the room. No one objected. Each of them knew. Power had shifted to her. Meanwhile, the woman walked calmly through the streets, enjoying the evening breeze and the scent of the city. She was in no hurry. She knew that every silence, every step under the flash of cameras, only deepened the tension. She didn't need to shout. Her silence did more than the loudest words. The next day, she was seen again at a branch. Now the staff showered her with excessive politeness. An administrator handed her a business card, a teller offered a personal consultant, and the manager himself came out to ask after her needs. It looked theatrical, forced. She nodded, listened, thanked them. But inside she felt it. They feared her more than they feared the scandal itself. That evening, another news report aired. A journalist said, "We tried to get a comment from her, but she declined. As long as she remains silent, the rumors will only grow." What is this woman hiding? And why is the bank so obviously avoiding direct answers? The report ended with shots of her son smiling from billboards beneath the slogan, "This bank is for everyone." The contrast was too stark. Viewers saw not an ad, but hypocrisy. The board gathered again that night. Their faces were grey, their eyes red from lack of sleep. "She holds us hostage," one muttered. "As long as she stays silent, we don't know where or when the lightning will strike." "We must invite her again," another suggested. "But not as a client, as a partner. If she sees we're willing to recognize her authority, maybe then." But the sentence trailed off. No one fully believed she could be persuaded. At home, she sat by her window. The night was quiet, only the city's hum reminding her that her story had already become part of public discourse. She knew, tomorrow, they would invite her again, but she had not yet decided if she would agree. Her silence was stronger than any deal. The second meeting was arranged in secret, without public announcements. Everything had to remain discreet, as though they weren't meeting with a client, but with someone whose decision could determine the fate of the entire corporation. The large conference room was perfectly staged. Chairs aligned precisely, folders stacked neatly on the table, even the air conditioning tuned so the room felt fresh but not cold. To the woman who entered, it all looked pitiful. She appeared as calmly as she had the first time. No lawyers, no guards, only herself. The directors rose almost in unison. One even gave a slight bow, a gesture that itself betrayed recognition of her power. "Thank you for coming," the chairman said, striving to keep his voice steady. "We understand that. We made a mistake, and we want to discuss how to make it right." She sat and regarded them with a long, steady look. "A mistake?" Her voice was soft, yet unyielding. "I've lived with these mistakes my entire life. On the street, in stores, in schools, now in banks. This isn't a mistake. This is a system." One director quickly interjected, "We're ready to do anything to atone. You'll receive any terms, any privileges. We are even willing to discuss your role in shaping the company's future strategy." She smiled, but without warmth. "Privileges?" she repeated quietly. "Should a person need privileges just to be treated with respect?" The silence that followed was crushing. No one dared to respond. Then she slowly pulled a folder from her bag. She spread documents across the table. At first, no one understood. Then the chairman's eyes widened. Before him lay deeds of ownership stock shares, signatures, seals. What is this?" someone whispered, though the answer was obvious. "This," she said evenly, "is the truth. This bank belongs to me. Every branch, every hall you sit in, every billboard with my son's smile." Her words struck like thunder. The directors sat frozen, some with horror in their eyes, others with despair. She rose, her figure towering over them. "Just weeks ago, your employees expelled me because they thought I didn't belong. And you, all of you, are their superiors, carriers of the same prejudice. You don't see people, you see labels. Today, you've felt what it is to be dependent on someone else's will. Let that feeling stay with you." They remained silent, as if stripped of their voices. Each of them understood. Every word she spoke was a verdict. "I'm not going to shut down this bank," she continued, "but I am going to change it. No more doors slammed in people's faces because of skin color. No more second-class clients. And if any of you try to resist, the guard at the door will be there for you." She gathered her papers, turned, and walked out. The door closed softly behind her, but to the board it sounded louder than any gavel strike. The next day, the news exploded. Mysterious woman revealed as owner of nation's largest bank. Mother of campaign face announces reforms. Board of directors in shock. Journalists swarmed her at home, at the office, in the streets, but she no longer hid. Her face had become a symbol of justice. People filled social media with messages of support. Clients thanked her for her courage. And those who had laughed in the branch weeks earlier now lowered their eyes. They realized they had humiliated not just someone with the right to be their client, but the very person who owned their jobs. The woman stood at the window of her office, gazing at the city below. Life bustled in the streets, and among the crowds were people who had suffered the same humiliations she once did. Now they had a voice. She knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. But today she had done the most important thing, shown that silence could become a weapon, and humiliation could turn into strength. And never again would anyone dare to tell her, "You cannot be our client."